This is TehachaPod. Sit back and relax as Key, Corey, Greg, and Ashley talk about what's happening in and around Tehachapi.
It's TehachaPod time. Key Budge, Greg Garrett, Corey Costello, Ashley Whitmore. How are y'all doing?
Doing good, Key.
Fantastic.
Doing good.
That was perfect, right in a row, too.
Yeah.
Just the way you... I guess
Hello.
We're trained well.
Well, you know, it's sounding better, and our timing is better, but it is season 4. 3 years ago, we launched TehachaPod.
Did we sound pretty naive, or me, at least?
We went through some growing pains.
The answer was yes to that.
Yeah, I think so. They won't, yeah.
It's a 3-year anniversary. Is there a cake involved?
Cupcake, maybe.
Key, you are ill-prepared. Where is our cake?
Yes, there should be a cake or cupcakes or something.
Well, I've been on storm watch.
Oh, that's
leading
true.
into this, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna fall to
Starting
the.
to sound like Corey now. Oh, God.
Where's the
I've got
music?
an answer for you.
Yeah.
But we have grown over the last 3 years.
Certainly.
We kind of tested it, if you will, when we launched 3 years ago, as we tried to get information, figuring out new ways to communicate with our residents.
Talked about this many times. The communication platform at the city of Tehachapi has also grown, Key. You know, a couple of years ago, I realized that we need to start communicating better with the public, the citizens, the taxpayers, who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, when we're going to do it, so on and so forth. And the podcast was just yet another platform, and it's worked really well. We have a little fun with this, of course, but, you know, we've talked to so many individuals, talked about so many projects, so many items going on in our city, in our community, in our region, that now it's really a respected, and it was from the beginning, but a very respected platform to get information.
So
out.
honest answer, 3 years ago, did you think it would be here 3 years from now?
You know, I wasn't sure. You know, right before we started recording, we listened to a clip, and I thought, oh, my God. And I think I had a cold or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, yeah, I'm kind of naive in the communication world. You know, podcasts, what's that? It's comedy. I'm not sure what it is. But I knew that it was something worth exploring. And it was an experiment. And, shoot, we're growing and being able to push more and more information out. So I'm super happy.
I think we've encouraged other people to do this in the government or county, city, whatever. I mean, we've talked to other cities on the show. There's just recently some new departments in the Kern County have launched podcasts based on the success of sort of this show and how to do it. So it's good. I think we were sort of a lab rat, I guess, you know, in this sort of realm with government podcasting, and I think. But
it didn't escape accidentally.
Yeah,
it was on purpose. No,
yeah,
you get the pun there. But obviously, I mean, Caltrans, Ridgecrest, the County of Kern, and others. You know, we're promoting this platform so that others can also learn from it and communicate better with their communities.
Mm-hmm. And we came to this thought to put it together based on numbers that you had, Corey, based on our commuting amount of residents.
Yeah.
And we looked at those numbers, and we had 65% of our workforce were commuters. Mm-hmm. And terrestrial radio, the traditional radio, numbers are down.
Yeah.
Well, and you can only listen to so many country western songs on the way to work.
Right.
I mean, honestly.
It doesn't serve Tehachapi, though. I mean,
Right.
You know, I used to work in local, even talk radio, and we didn't talk about Tehachapi. It wasn't part of the market, really. So Bakersfield, Lancaster radio, they don't consider Tehachapi part of their market, really. So, yeah, even listening to regular radio, you're not getting information that's pertinent to Tehachapi.
Well, I think a huge part of our success, too, though, is the fact that both Key and Corey came from the radio business. Had we started this before they became a part of the team, I don't know that it would be quite the success
I think
it is.
you could have, Ashley.
Well, I mean, that's true.
No, and I
That's
said
true.
that in all seriousness, and you're pumping up their egos right now. But no, it's true.
Keep going.
It is absolutely true.
going.
The background
I really
certainly
enjoy you
helped.
being on this show, Ashley, by the way.
Oh, well, thank
in case
you,
I
Corey.
didn't say
Thank
that today.
you.
There's only room for 3 now, not 4. Key, who should we keep?
Yeah.
Corey or Ashley?
This is, well, it's our anniversary, but it's also kind of an audition as well.
There you go.
There you go.
They didn't,
Well, you know,
I didn't tell them.
We're going to let people vote.
It's funny. It's funny you brought up the commuting piece, because that's originally, again, one of the reasons why we say, hey, let's get people in this captive audience for this 35-minute commute. And that was the initial intent. And it still obviously is serving that purpose. But within, weeks of the first show, we had this little thing called COVID-19 hit and shut the world down. And so we weren't even in the studio, or what kind of was a studio at the time for us, doing the show. You were at home, I was at home, Greg was here, we're doing it via Zoom, we're getting guests on via. So it changed instantly. It changed from a commuter show to give people whatever info we have about COVID shutdowns and reopenings and shutdowns again and this and that. So right away we had
Well, we were thrust into the fast lane.
Yeah.
There was the learning curve was very steep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the timing it worked out very well for the podcast where we got to talk to real people and our community got to hear from them directly.
Yeah.
Where normally they get a 10-second soundbite on TV news, we were able to have a 30, 40-minute conversation, with the Director of Public Health, with Assemblyman Fong, with Senator Grove. They would give us state updates.
Yeah.
And those were, I think, critical in those. When we look at the numbers of the downloads, it reflects that. People were hungry for that information and wanted to know the local aspect of what we were talking about in this whole COVID picture, as there was it was going different directions, and there was a new bullet point every day for it. But we used it to provide information to the community.
And it also springboarded, sorry, Ashley, but springboarded our social media too, Key. I mean, we're talking about podcasting here, but I remember when COVID first started, I was the only one in City Hall, and I would take videos of myself talking about information that we had learned, put it on our social media, obviously the podcast, but we were quickly becoming a go-to resource for the community.
Yeah, and not just city residents.
One-stop shop almost.
Right. Yeah, we became a news organization that put out information as it was being made available.
Well, we didn't even start with COVID, even though it started right during the COVID time. We started with PSPS, which was a huge deal at the time, sitting at home for 3 days with no power.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's funny is as we talk about this and we talk about the COVID and the PSPS, before we even got to episode 1, we had started to record little bites and sounds and trying to figure out what that was. We started down at the Energy Summit, which would have been October, November, I believe, of is that about when it comes out in the fall, end of fall?
Yeah, yeah.
And we recorded and interviewed some people that were guest speakers at the Energy Summit. Maybe we can figure out how to incorporate that. And we kind of worked through, did some mock interviews of different people, just trying to figure out what the format was going to be, how it was going to be received. And then when PSPS was thrust upon us and Senator Grove held a town hall meeting and Mayor Wiggins at the time was also a speaker, we said, episode 1.
Yeah.
Let's take a listen to what we sounded like back on March 2nd of 2020.
No.
Yeah. Doodle-doo, doodle-doo.
I want to welcome everybody to TehachaPod in the city of Tehachapi. This is our charter mission in our venture of communicating in different ways with our community. I'm Key Budge. Along with me, I've got Corey Costello, Greg Garrett. Guys, introduce yourselves to the audience, and we've got some great information to share.
Well, I'm Greg Garrett. I'm the city manager, and this is an exciting day for me and for the city and the community. We're adding another section to our communications to the residents of this great region. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm Corey Costello, Economic Development Coordinator, and this is always great because Greg figured out how to take 2 former radio guys, and say, what can they do? They can podcast.
Yeah, but we want to make sure that it's not podcasting all day, every day. It's
That's
part of
right.
our portfolio.
That's right.
We're going to have a lot of fun with this, but it's going to be communication, right?
This is about getting information out to the public in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
We've got so many people that are commuting, that leave our beautiful community, and this gives them a chance to stay up to date with what's going on in and around our great city. There you go. That's what we sounded like 3 years ago.
I
It
apologize.
sounded so young.
You had a cold. You may have had COVID at the time because
might.
2 weeks later,
didn't even know.
COVID was a thing. You didn't even know. No, I apologize for the sound quality. I can now hear it as a person who's always obsessed with sound quality. I'm like, it was fuzzy in the background.
Now, were you doing that from home on your end?
No, that we were here, but we had really, really basic equipment that.
Well, I think you brought some stuff from home, didn't you? In your garage.
Things that I may or may not have returned to previous employers. And Key in the same boat. We ended up with a bunch of stuff to literally put together enough to pull off a podcast.
Yeah.
Different microphones. Everybody had a different mic. Like we all just had whatever we put together.
It was very put together hodgepodge, and it was a test. It was, let's see if this works. We had a lot of downloads for that episode, which just kind of proved, the community was like, this is different.
Yeah.
And they dialed in. So,
and that was one of the first episodes, and kind of the COVID stuff aside, but that was one of the first episodes that really started the podcast of kind of in key. You talked about being our own news organization, to where the podcast became a source for the news. As the news industry changed, fewer people work in the news industry, reporters, whether that's newspaper, radio, television. And so they started using the podcast as a source. They were citing the podcast, guests on the podcast, things we said, results of the podcast because of, maybe a change in policy somewhere. So yeah, that was one of the first shows where we kind of tackled an issue, and that actually became part of the news.
Yeah, great point, because we have throughout the 3 years and some 235 episodes, it has been used multiple times for that exact purpose by news agencies in Bakersfield and here in Tehachapi by our local reporters, because they get to hear Greg Garrett, the city manager, talk about whatever this topic is, and they can quote you from the podcast.
Be careful what I say.
Exactly.
Holy Lord. I had no idea it was that serious. But how many downloads have we had since, an estimate maybe?
70,000.
70,000 downloads.
Yes.
Wow.
235 episodes. So that's quite a lot of episodes. Yeah. So if we look back over the years, season 1, we did 45 shows, beginning with March 2nd of 2020. So we did about one a week. And COVID helped drive a lot of that, just getting the information, putting it out. And then season 2, we did 71 episodes January through December.
Growing a little bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then season 3, 106 episodes, which was 2022. Mm-hmm. And so we did average about 2 a week. And I think that's probably about where we are, because it's information driven. So as things come, now we know what the community wants to hear, wants to listen to.
Well, now you've established a couple weeklies. You have Claire Scotty coming in talking about weekend events,
right?
At the wineries, at the microbreweries, and other items. And then you have Jeanette Power, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, coming in once a month, I believe.
Yeah, once a month.
Talking about, the past month and the upcoming month with the chamber events and what opportunities, educational forums, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think one thing, and Corey, you and I worked on some of these projects, but about small business, especially during COVID, there was so much unknown. And we have so many small businesses here in Tehachapi. They're our neighbors. And we did a lot of things to really try and promote small business growth. Remember them when you go out. Let's make sure we take care of that. And that's kind of how we've continued to make sure we mention small business along the way.
Yeah, and we tell their stories a little bit, and I know we want to certainly try to do more of that and just kind of get the faces behind, because I have the opportunity and to meet a lot of these folks and build relationships with them, and they've got great stories as to why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, even just yesterday we have an epic snowstorm, and Greg and I braved the elements to pop into Kelsey's because they were open. And, the owners themselves, Virginia and Bill Sheridan, Virginia's waiting tables, Bill's cooking because they couldn't get many employees in, but they wanted to be open. And that's the reality of small business in this town.
And they had great biscuits and gravy, just saying.
They did a great job. Great. Yeah. They had, they had an employee from their next door antique business, which was closed. She was helping, wait tables because they were just shorthanded and she was there. And so anyway, those kind of things and those kind of stories and those kind of people. So we have a lot of that, and it's good to showcase that.
And I remember the reopening of our businesses. We had that downtown event,
the grand opening,
and those sorts of things matter. It's important to get information out into the public's hands and let them know what's going on.
That was, I believe, was it June 15th? Was that 2021?
I think it would have been
over a year, it was 2021.
Yeah.
And we had was it about 100 businesses, small local businesses from the greater Tehachapi area, not just in the city. We wanted to be very inclusive of the entire business community in our zip code. They all came out for a ribbon cutting, a ceremonial ribbon cutting on Green Street. And that was well attended.
And we kind of took that too as we were getting back to business. And even after that event, things changed. And there were more COVID shutdowns and this and that, and you can't do this, you can't do that. Business just went on because we kind of made that. People needed to get back to work. The business needed to stay open. And so for us, that was kind of a moment. And it obviously was a celebratory, but then at the same time, even as things changed, we just let folks do what they needed to do to stay in business. And that was really important. So that was a fun day and an important time. And, I think we learned from that and kind of just trudged forward.
And if I remember correctly, the governor went to Universal Studios to celebrate June 15th at Universal Studios, the opening of a major attraction. Well, great. We celebrated small business, the backbone of America.
Yeah.
And
The ones who were hammered the most by COVID
Yeah.
shutdowns and lockdowns and things.
And we don't get political on the show, but to me, that was one of those messages of like where our priorities are. And we look here at local government, and it's about mom and pop businesses. It's about what's in your downtown. And our downtown has thrived over the last 3 years, and people continue to turn out and support. So, if we played a little hand in reminding people, I'm very proud of that we really focused and highlighted the things that go on with our small businesses over the years.
And we rolled the loyalty program out too around that same time or a little bit before that or whenever. And that was great. And we talked about that a lot on this show, was the small business loyalty program and buying, $100 worth of stuff, getting a gift card to restaurants, just getting people to think again how they shopped and how they where they ate.
Yeah. I mean, those are that was an entire show topic just on itself, explaining that program. And, it's,
And people came in with money and said, here, I want to give you money to keep it going longer than what you've budgeted. So we did that a couple times.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. That's right.
We've had some other guests throughout the years that, if we look at, episode 1 that we highlighted at the beginning, but that was about PSPS. And Ashley, you brought that up. And we really kind of hammered Southern California Edison in that episode and just kind of laid them out for.
Well, we hammered them with the facts.
It was all fact driven.
Just like high speed rail, but we don't want to go away from PSPS or SCE, but we communicate the facts and we put people in the hot seat so that they will do the right thing.
And I think with that episode, it caught Edison's attention. And we were told that podcast was shared all the way up through their higher ranks at Southern California Edison. They addressed some of our concerns, and they put Tehachapi on the map of hardening the grid. And that was what we really wanted is, hey, yeah, we're a mountain community, but we deserve the attention. We've paid for this infrastructure rebuilds. Why are we not under consideration? Why is it Simi Valley in the greater LA area that's getting taken care of? We want attention. Mm-hmm. And it created a feedback from Edison.
Well, it worked. At the end of the day, I mean, Edison came up here in full force, and they spent an incredible amount of money. And we thank them for that, quite honestly. And they changed their grids a little bit here and there, If one part of the grid in Hart Flat is not, they shut it off because of PSPS, but it shuts off Walmart and gas stations in the city, well, that's not logical, right? And so there were some modifications and changes, and the community of Tehachapi is far better off because of the investment that Southern California made.
And it's continued too. Annually now, since that point in time, we have some of their crews that come up in their helicopters. They do the infrared photography of all of the lines, all their infrastructure, so that way they're ahead of everything. So annually they're up here now.
And that was one of the first shows that, again, like we said, kind of put pressure on an entity. And Greg had brought it up briefly, but high speed rail was another one. We got an EIR about the section in Tehachapi. Things were promised, and then when the report came out, they were all just ignored. Sound walls, that sort of thing. And so whether or not we thought that was going to get built or not, it was not what they had said they were going to do. We had a podcast immediately about it, and we went on a little bit of a media frenzy regarding our unhappiness, and that show too went all the way up the chain, and next thing you know, we're getting phone calls and saying, let's meet, let's figure this out.
I remember that. I left a meeting with high-speed rail leadership, and I was going to use the word frenzy, and you used it, Corey. When I came out of that meeting, I grabbed Key and Corey and said, all right, we're going to fire up the communication machine. So we had podcasts, social media. I went on KFI, AM 640, the Bob and John show, I think.
John and Ken.
Sorry. Bob, Ken, Joe. I don't know.
You got Bob and Tom and John and Ken.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I don't want to offend anybody.
Well, we are on iHeartMedia along with them, so they could be listening.
Well, they are co-workers, right? They're
colleagues.
They're colleagues.
Right.
And John and Ken did acknowledge that on a later show that I was on with them, that, you're on iHeartMedia as well, because you can download this podcast on many platforms, but one also is side by side with their show.
But what happened after that blitz, and that was high-speed rail actually reverted back and followed through, at least for now, on their commitments, and they said, okay, yes, we will follow through on what we put on paper before.
And
we've
we've
been working with them for years on this project.
And that's happened a few other times in that last few years. I mean, just to utility companies sometimes going back through and not doing what they said they were going to do, and we had to explain, how we, why we do certain things in the community, why we plan for underground utilities as opposed to overhead and that sort of stuff. So that stuff's helped get the word out so people understand why when they hear one side of a story that says, the city is making us blank when actually, it was agreed upon in advance, and why we decide to do those sort of things.
I was just thinking about what we're talking about, all these different projects and events and working with other entities, whether it's government or private. It's all about local control. Right? This is a city that embraces local control. We are in charge of our own destiny. We're not letting, the county of Kern or Sacramento or DC, influence so much that we're just along for the ride. We want to make certain that we know where we're going. We have plans in place, and we're sticking to those plans.
Let's listen to a little piece of that Southern California Edison show that we brought back in the follow-up when Edison acknowledged the heat that they felt from us with Cal Rossi.
When we get it wrong, you hold us accountable, but it is always with the goal in mind to find solutions to very complex problems. I think some of our issues with notifications, you were instrumental in working through that with us. Obviously highlighting the importance of the commercial section of the Viento circuit to keep that alive. And, the reason you haven't seen a lot of PSPS events or any on the Viento is because you brought that to our attention, and Mr. Ohanian and his group, worked hard to harden that section of the grid that allowed that to be excluded from PSPS events. And so the partnership is really bearing fruit. I just thank you for your engagement, and I think it's also important to note that for the listening audience that Mr. Garrett does sit on our PSPS working group. He's engaged with our executives, and he's representing the city of Tehachapi well in that process, and I think it's borne some fruit that has benefited the constituents of Tehachapi.
All right, so Cal spelled it out. He said, we put a little bit of heat on them, and they acknowledged it, and they paid us attention. So, to your point, Greg, the pressure that we're able to apply with facts. Here's the information. Here it is now. Not waiting a week, a month, wait for the white paper document to come out and then talk about it. No, this is live. It's active, and we treat it as that living document, with what's going on, and we inform the community. So they're not waiting 90 days where they have a 10-day period to respond. It's like, no, this is happening now. You need to be aware.
Yeah, facts are like math. It's not wrong. It's either right or wrong. You can't, math is a language, and 1 + 1 = 2. And the facts are, 1 + 1 = 2. And when you talk about that and reveal it, pull back the layers of the onion, you have nothing to go back on.
I don't want people to think that we're like weaponizing the podcast either. It's
Certainly
not
not.
always we want this, so we're going to use this to attack. It is. I think most people will sometimes think, and they don't anymore. I think initially they did, that we're okay with certain things, right? We're okay with the power being shut off. We're okay with high-speed rail just blazing a trail through the middle of town and calling it good. We're okay with, and that's not the case. And so we need to let people know what we're feeling, and that most of the time we're on their side. Like, we get it. And so I think that's what the show does, is sometimes let you know, hey, we're working on this. We're not happy either. We know you're not. We're not either. And so we're working. So that's more of it. It's not so much just going after on certain things. It is basically echoing the sentiment of the public and using this to let them know, hey, yeah, we're on your side and we're working for that too.
But it's all about also creating relationships. I was thinking about Caltrans just now. We've got the climbing lanes from Bakersfield to Tehachapi that we're working with KernCog and the state of California, Caltrans, on the climbing lanes. We're working with Caltrans to design and build a new maintenance facility in our city that will better improve the maintenance of 58 so we can keep it open more often than not.
We're
whenever
always
we have bad weather.
advocating for Tehachapi.
Advocating is a good word, right.
Yeah, and I think that's when we would look at some of the commentary from some of the communities outside of the city, Bear Valley, Stallion Springs. They would say, you only care about yourselves and not about what's going on with the rest of us. And it's like, this gave us that platform saying, no, it's not true. we do advocate for the entire community. We have to be focused on what happens at the city, but it has a ripple effect to our surrounding communities. And I think with the Edison show, that really kind of played in because we took questions from the community. We asked those and we gave those to Edison to answer. Hey, here's what, our constituents and our surrounding communities are asking. We held them to it. They had answers, and that was something that was really nice. And as Corey mentioned, this hasn't been a, hey, let's point a finger in a chest type of show, but we've used it when we need to get information out. But one of our main points that we wanted when we were designing the show was to talk about the city of Tehachapi and what's going on with our infrastructure.
Projects.
Yes, and things that are going on. And we've done that and had department heads on the show to talk about their area, the project specifically, and share the timing of things that
we've
occur.
had Jay, Andrew, Don, Tyler, others. We're constantly investing tens of millions of dollars into the city, into maintaining and improving the infrastructure. And that's for lots of reasons, right? You want to be proud of your community. You want to have public safety, the ability to get places. You want to invest so that people can invest their private dollars into our city. So lots of reasons to do that, and really proud of the fact that we're able to push out information. Projects coming, or a project is actually happening now. This is what's going on, or we just wrapped this up. All and everything in between. Whenever we do a project, they're usually very, very complex. Lots of paperwork that we have to deal with, the bureaucracy, unfortunately. Again, with healthy budgets, we're able to pre-fund those and then get reimbursed later, so on and so forth. But yeah, good information with projects.
And those are some of the most highly downloaded shows, too. It does show that people want to know what's going on with their tax dollars and why projects maybe take a little bit longer, it seems, when the government's involved in whatever's going on. And we're able to explain that. And we just see the downloads go with it saying, I want that information.
Now, government hires private individuals to do the work. So that private company sometimes does not perform to the level, and then it gets a little squirrely. But we are managing that. We're looking out for those tax dollars being spent appropriately.
Part of the private-public work that goes on.
That's right.
And then besides our talking about construction and infrastructure, we've mentioned grants. Grants are a key to getting these projects up off the ground and explaining the grant process, because there's people that don't like grants. But when we think about it, it's our tax dollars that go to Sacramento, then we're fighting to get them back. And that's part of the process.
Or even things like, oh, yeah, you're building another bike path. Well, actually, no, repaving a road. But the fact that we added a bike path got us that money to repave said road, because that's how the state looks at it, right? They want you to have that more active transportation. Or there's just grant dollars available just for active transportation. And so, we're doing that. But that's also adding a sidewalk to an area that doesn't have a sidewalk, and that bike path might be part of it, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of money out there, and why not improve, your city with that money, even though if you don't agree on said bike path. But most people, I think, are loving the great network we have now.
Yeah, I'll be a little critical and bold at this point. People are kind of bold on social media, anti this, anti that, but they will never call me. They won't ask what's really going on. Where did the money come from? What are you really doing? I get the feeling that they don't really want to know the answer, and I'm getting way out here on a limb maybe. But honestly, if you want to know, call me.
Yeah.
I'm Information Central. I'll let you know everything there is to know about whatever we're doing.
You can't be a good keyboard warrior, though, if you don't know.
Yeah, with the
if you know
facts. That doesn't help.
So why would they call you?
Yeah.
But that's, for sure. I mean, part of the goal of the podcast was to give the information to the community, to arm them with the information.
We want people to know. We want people
but
to know.
that's the
Well,
best,
and we've
though.
seen that, too.
Yeah,
right?
we've seen those when there is a comment thread about something, and the best is when someone says, "Oh, they talked about it on the podcast," and they'll put the link in.
That's true. Yeah.
Or the public will
happened.
answer the question that we don't even have to answer.
Yeah.
And so it actually we've turned a corner.
But when they use the
There's no
show
doubt.
to say, "Oh yeah, they talked about this water line replacement on Denison, and here's the link to the show, and this is how long it's going to take, etc." It's pretty funny.
Some of the neat. Sorry,
I was just going to say that's when people are listening. They're actually listening to the details of what you're sharing.
Yep.
Getting
Some of the neatest interviews that I think we've conducted here are veteran affairs. So we've got the American Legion. They sponsor a lot of things. They help a lot of people, and every time those folks come in, it really brings me up.
Yeah, Kevin Davey, Dean Peterson have been repeat guests. We've had them on to talk about Memorial Day. We've had them on to talk about Veterans Day. Just the projects that they're
flag
involved in.
program
The flag
that we're
program.
participating now at City Hall. You can come to City Hall and buy an American flag.
Yeah.
Made in America.
Yeah.
And it's helping the veterans organization, so we promote that.
Right. And they also this year decided we hadn't retired flags properly. And then we tied that in with a 9/11 remembrance out at the rodeo grounds. They were the leaders in that. And, so those are the opportunities we get a chance to talk to Kevin and Dean and Tony from the American Legion, and just the great work that they do. And then they've been involved in some other things. Because of them coming on, they've been involved like in Make-A-Wish. We had a young man who had a wish granted, and it happened during the Apple Festival.
The superhero.
Yeah, the superhero. And it was awesome because we got the community theater, who's been a constant guest here on the show. We got the American Legion to come through, and Make-A-Wish, who's been a guest. They've all been guests on the show, and we put them all together to make this happen, and it really was a fantastic event.
No doubt.
Something that we didn't do a podcast on, but as a result of all the people that we've met, talked to, worked with, we put them together and directly put them together, and they put a fantastic program together for this family.
It's been fun to talk to the creative people in the community too. We have a lot of them, and it's awesome. And a lot of them have moved here. They retired from wherever they were in Hollywood, and I remember laughing at the one, I can't remember his name right now, but he was a script writer. Remember? And he was the guy who passed on Back to the Future because he said he read it and he goes, I didn't like the script. And I'm like, the guy who passed on Back to the Future on TehachaPod. But we've had those folks, and whether they're theater people or they're writers, they're authors, they're artists, and they're in our community now. I mean, we've had, whether they're that and retired folks doing it now, or they're young people. We had Seda Wolf, who's been writing comic books, and she's a published comic book author and artist here in Tehachapi. So those have been kind of cool to really see who we have kind of living around us and what they're doing to contribute those skills to the community, whether they're working with TCTA or they're working with, another group organization, bringing their kind of talents to Tehachapi. It's been kind of fun to talk to a lot of those folks.
Tom Mills and his look back at our historic earthquake and the film that he put together for the Heritage League.
Right, Tehachapi Arts Commission with the annual art show now. That's a big deal. I think third annual this year. So big stuff going. The art community is really growing in our community.
And I think we helped TCTA.
Absolutely.
As they were coming back from COVID, and they said, hey, they had pennies in their bank account and trying to put together shows, and I think helped put some people in seats by featuring what they were doing, how hard they were working, and how fantastic we expected the performance to be. And that's always been the feedback from each of the shows that they do. So now we've booked them every time they've got a new play that's coming out or musical. We talk about it and talk to the directors or actors involved, and just share, expose what they're doing, the hard work.
Yeah, there's they bring a ton of energy to the show, and that's been fun. And we've even talked to other people that, one of my favorites was Bob Souza, who was, the godfather of the Tehachapi wine industry, right? He planted the first vines 20 years ago, actually. This year's the anniversary. And, he's no longer an owner, but he's still involved in the community and still supportive of the wine industry. And, telling us stories about driving a pickup truck with hand-painted, Souza Vineyard on the side and delivering to Albertsons when he first started and that sort of thing. And where they've come, where the industry's at now, federally recognized as an AVA, as a growing region for wine. So cool to hear his stories. And, of course, he's, so animated and got some great things to tell. It was fun.
The Wine Guy was a great show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I've seen Bob at a few events since then, and he goes, Key, I love that thing. What was it called? A cast pod or that radio thing, whatever. I love doing it. That was a fun day.
He's a forever comedian.
Yeah.
He was the perfect host to own a winery, wine tasting.
And then that jumped in. We started thinking about the wine industry, and then that started the show that you mentioned with Claire and starting to do some weekly updates. And it was like our and that also falls back to, Corey, in economic development. And when you look at numbers and you pull the AI, this data that surrounds people that come and visit our community, that helped. When we looked at this show, it's like, okay, we're talking about wineries that are outside the city limits. But then when you tracked, you saw something that was identifiable.
Yeah, I mean, it's still mostly day trippers. I mean, there are a few people that will stay in hotels, and so there is an impact, obviously, in the hotels in the city. But they're coming. We know where they're going before and where they're going after, and a lot of them are stopping and getting gas. They're eating dinner downtown, and then they're hitting the road. And so they're making stops and they're making deposits, so to speak, in the city on their way to and or from the wineries out in Cummings Valley. So they are having an economic impact on the city. And then you see what we call that sort of the dollar spreading. They're coming in, they're spending money at the wineries, but also spending money at the restaurants downtown, which then obviously they turn around and they buy from vendors, they employ people. So we see that dollar sort of get spread throughout the community based on the impact.
And the microbreweries and the wineries now have created a music scene. Derek Davis from West Lane Brewery, I think we're going to have him on a future podcast.
Yes.
He was an integral part of the genesis of the music scene in Tehachapi. Really cool stuff.
I think that is part of it, and that kind of flow back to COVID when people were looking for things to do.
Yeah.
And Derek, thought, well, if we bring in a musician, then we got to bring in the food truck, so that way they follow the rules that have been put in place by the state, and eating outside, and all of a sudden it became destinations, and people that were living in cities, Bakersfield, Lancaster, Palmdale, they're going like, what? I can go to Tehachapi. Mm-hmm. I can hear a little bit of music. I can get something to eat. I can enjoy a local craft beer or a glass of wine. It really brought people in to introduce what was going on.
It was big for the wine industry because, especially in the Central Valley, because people in the Central Valley always tend to go to Paso Robles. And they could go to Paso Robles and sit outside, but it's hot in the summer in Paso Robles, triple digits. And so folks were coming to Tehachapi during the COVID kind of regulation days because they could sit outside at Dorner or Triassic and enjoy nice weather. And that really exposed them to this industry.
Yeah, and speaking of cool stuff, what about the Edwards Air Force Base folks? General Higer has been here a couple times. Mm-hmm. Everything that's going on out there, it's a pleasure to have him and any of his colleagues on the podcast.
Yeah, I remember from that show, and that was, if I remember correctly, it was like a July 4th. We were highlighting Independence Day, and we had an opportunity to thank, the military and having General Higer on.
And there were some flyovers, different things happening.
Yes, but when in the conversation, something I didn't know is that the pilots that are out at Edwards, as a part of their training in school, they come up here to Tehachapi, to the glider airport, and they do soaring and glide. And he was talking about that and things that I had never heard of, but just the fact that we bring these, ace pilots, these fighter pilots, up here to learn new techniques or whatever it is that they're learning. Not
just pleasure. This is work.
They're
actually
training.
Learning how to fly without an engine.
Yeah.
Right, that's
is that what the goal is?
Well, kind of, I suppose. You can fly. You don't have to have an engine to fly, right? You soar. And they come up here, NASA and the test pilot school, they all come up here and utilize our Mountain Valley Airport on the south side to do that, yeah.
I had no idea. I thought that was pretty cool. And then, so speaking of airports, Ashley, you got introduced to the show when we brought you on to talk about the airport that you manage.
We probably had to do a lot of edits on that show.
No, that's when we realized, whoa, we need to have her as a co-host.
Yes, you were so comfortable in talking about, the airport, and then I brought you in when we did the Stoll event to help co-host with me as a guest co-host, and we talked about that event. What was that kind of experience like for you to all of a sudden to go, one, you're a guest, and now we're saying, hey, let's occupy the seat and help ask the questions?
Well, I don't
Honored,
know what to say on that.
Flattered. Let me help you out here.
Is this how you feel every time you're in this room?
Well, y'all should.
No, it was great. It was great to, have a little background first off on what was already going on. But Anita, who we had in for that Stoll event, was so excited. And she's so passionate about the event. So it was so great to feel that passion as she was in here and everything.
No doubt. STOL is an acronym, short takeoff and landing. And so there was a national event, first time West Coast in Tehachapi, California. So pretty proud of that. Yeah, and we hosted. That was really neat.
We did.
The weather didn't cooperate. Well, it was blowing a gale, and it was really good because if you're doing short takeoff and landing, you can take off and land in 10 feet. With the weather blowing, the wind blowing 50 miles an hour. But
I unfortunately ended up with COVID and had to watch on the cameras from the airport the entire event.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
But with that, you were on the show as a guest. Then we bring you in as a guest host. And then I talked to Greg and I said, Greg, we look at our people that are paying attention. When we look at our analytics, we see that our audience is 2-to-1 female. And we have just 3 guys that host and talk. It was that we need to have a female as a co-host. And Ashley has stepped right in. She's very comfortable with it. And then when you said, yeah, absolutely, and then it was like, now we got to convince Ashley that podcasting is now in her future. And because she'd never listened to an episode.
What?
What?
Truth be told, she
Throwing you right under the bus there.
Yeah, she had never listened.
But I listen to every single one now.
Yeah, but I mean that speaks. If you think about it, we have a female audience, but you got 3 guys talking. Who are we talking to? And just having a female perspective, which is
and a professional. And she sits in your seat, Key. When you're out, she'll actually host and interview, and it's worked really well.
And he's had to choose between having me sit there or Corey. So I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very happy he made that decision.
But that's been a nice thing too. Is you mentioned that because Corey has filled this seat where I'm in, where I kind of run the show, if you will. When I'm not around or not available, and Corey, second nature, goes right back to his radio days of producing these shows. So that's been nice that we have that flexibility. We have depth in our roster.
Don't ever ask me. There is no chance I run that board. 0 chance.
I already know that.
Yeah.
So not to worry. You'll always have the co-pilot seat right here.
Well, I'm the navigator.
Yeah, the navigator.
Well,
Okay.
that was apparent in the last show when you were at out on our far remote weather outpost, Key, when I pulled you in via fancy Bluetooth to the console, and Greg was like, "How'd you do that?" I'm like, we've been doing this since the beginning. Like, this is easy. You just kind of do
Greg
this.
claims to be an IT expert.
He was like,
I'm not sure.
IT.
Oh my! They were stunned that like magic. All of a sudden, Key's voice appeared, and we're have nothing connected to the board, and it was pretty awesome.
But he forgets that's how we brought in the Speaker of the House now.
Yep,
Congressman Kevin McCarthy.
That's right.
And if you remember that conversation, he was being driven in Washington D.C. from the House to whatever he was going to the next meeting, and he had a 10-minute window to give us, and it was a fun conversation to have with him because I learned things about his background and growing up in our area and actually growing up on the family ranch out in Caliente.
Yeah. And that was actually, I think that was before we were able to do a little bit of upgrade to get some technology in here. But I think that goes back to kind of our sort of hodgepodging equipment together. We were trying to figure out, okay, we got to get our congressman on the phone. And so I got this little doohickey, and we'll plug it in your phone, and you take your phone off the hook, and we'll do this. And we were able to, it really was an impressive, eclectic mix of cables. But we pulled that one off, and it sounded all right. So,
But that comes from our background of working at small market radio.
With zero budget.
Yeah, exactly. So we
make
were
it
able to pull
happen.
it off.
Just make it work. Yeah.
But I mean, their Congressman McCarthy was one of our guests to talk about things that were going on, and I think we even might have mentioned truck climbing lanes with him at the time. And so it's been something that we've depending on who our guests are, we always have a tie back to Tehachapi.
Yeah.
How many small cities do you think get the Speaker of the House on their podcast?
Yeah.
Not many.
No.
And we're working to get them on now as the speaker. We always, every time we see their people, they know there's an open invite.
So I know, Mr. Speaker, you're listening now. So please, our calendar is open.
He's a regular listener, right? You have that.
His
info?
team is.
All right.
His team is because we had to basically audition for him because, I mean, he's on national media.
Yeah.
And they listen to the podcast leading up and how we conduct ourselves and how we treat guests and the topic matter that's at hand.
Yeah,
and
that makes
then
sense.
That's when all of a sudden I got the email, Congressman McCarthy will be available from this time to this time. He'd like to do the show.
And same thing with Senator Grove
Yes.
and Assemblyman Fong and County Supervisor Scribner. We've all been blessed with their leadership and their ability to engage with us.
Yeah.
And give us 10 minutes of their time.
I would just love to see like on the speaker's calendar because, he's very, very, very busy now. And, he's literally greeting world leaders and that sort of thing. I'd love to see like, on his calendar, like greet world leader blank. And then right next to it, TehachaPod.
Oh, yeah.
That would be awesome.
You could frame that and put it in the studio. That would be cool.
Yeah, kind of bookend and then meet with president,
Right.
It'd be nice to have us right now wedged in there,
Well, we've covered a lot of ground over the last 3 years, Key.
where are we going to go in 2023? I mean, whatever happens on a day to day, what impacts us, we just don't know. I mean, snowstorm comes through, and we decide we need to do storm watch.
Yeah.
And Corey, you sat in and called me and says, "Hey, we're doing storm watch." You produce a special little music for it to help highlight it. And
Key refuses to play it, but
That's
I
why
know,
I'm
right?
glad
It's
you're
still on
back.
the board there. It's still on the board.
Erase that.
but even and with that prompts me to, like, Gary Mazzola from TCTA. He wrote a song called "This Is Tehachapi," and he offered it to us, so we use that as our intro and background music because it's local. It's
Keeping it local.
Tehachapi. Instead of having a produced piece, this is something that's raw that Gary wrote and wanted to share. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I mean, when you really think about the roots of your community, and we've got a local artist that created something and says, hey, if you want it, you can share it. And I go, I'll figure out how to make it work. And then, having voiceover work. Originally, we had Lauren Carter, who lived here in Tehachapi. She worked at KUZZ. She did our openings once we had a produced opening. And now we've got Maddie Jansen, who's from Channel 17, who's done the most recent voiceover work. And she lives here in the greater Tehachapi
And those
area.
guys are all donating their time
Yes.
to assist. We ask for suggestions. If somebody wants us to interview somebody or a topic, let us know and we'll do that. I was just thinking about Tim Reed, the new
he'd be great.
spaceport manager of Mojave Air and Spaceport. He'd be great. We need to get him on the horn.
All right,
I'm sure
Ashley.
he'd be
I
all
bet we
about
could
coming
hook him up.
Let's do it.
Let's get him in studio, though. I don't like when we hook up the phones and stuff.
He likes Tehachapi. He wants to be in Tehachapi.
Awesome.
So he'll come up.
Yeah.
And then, and here in 2023, one thing we're really going to expand upon, and it's small businesses, Greg, and highlighting these small businesses. And we're going to, we've done it, but I think with the Derek Davis show and what he's done at West Lane, I think he had his 5-year anniversary here recently.
It's Saturday night, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
That we'll have him on, and it gives us an opportunity to highlight his business. And I think that's where we're going to do is really look to highlight businesses that are here in town.
That's the next step. Key and I have been talking about, Key's full-time now. He's been for a couple of years, but we're actually thinking about another part-time person, quite frankly,
Right.
that could help and enhance what we're doing here. And we talk about maybe interviewing downtown businesses or businesses in the Tehachapi area, but also helping promote different things, working with the chamber, working with the Tourism Commission, working with the Greater Tehachapi Economic Council. There's lots more to do. And if we can assist, we're going to continue to push that envelope so that we can become better and better and better every day.
Yeah, and Corey probably can relate to this, working in small market radio, is that you ask the community for input, and then depending on what time of day it is, you either get the same person that responds, or you maybe get crickets and no one responds when you're on live radio. Well, when we started asking for community input, it was a little slow and not much, and now I'm getting constant emails and calls saying, hey, how about this for a show idea? Or I've got this as a topic that I think is interesting. What do you think? And those are things that help, because then we really do relate to what the community, the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah, that's right.
And then nonprofits. We've featured nonprofits, kind of glanced at it, but I think the nonprofits, and we've talked about Friends of the Depot, we've talked about TCTA, Tehachapi Cancer Foundation, Salvation Army, Make-A-Wish, the Love Tehachapi group in the work that they do. We've really tried. We've had the Rotary Club, we've had Kiwanis. We've really tried to talk to as many nonprofits as we can. We're going to have the Girl Scouts on here in the coming weeks.
They're bringing cookies?
It'll be after their cookie season. We're going to get them at spring break when the girls are out of school.
You need to move that date up.
They better still bring cookies. They might just want to hoard a few boxes.
If they're
But
listening,
those
they
young
may.
women are future leaders of our community.
Yes.
They
And beyond.
absolutely are.
Yes.
Can't wait.
And they have a robotics team that's award-winning from Troop 8014, so we'll hear about that. They have their own website. It's really, if you take a peek at it, you see what these young women have done in the different programs, and it's really amazing the talent that is coming. Like you said, Greg, the leadership, and we'll get a chance. We're gonna bring the whole troop in.
We got some girl bosses coming up then.
That's right.
All right.
That's right. So
We should have Ashley host.
Oh, absolutely.
Will that be cool?
That would be fun.
Yeah, I
I
think
would be
it
all about that one.
good. But that's going to be, we're looking at those kinds of things, of opportunities to highlight and feature things that go on in our community and to highlight these young women. They came to a city council to meet Mayor Smith at the time, and they stepped up and said, hey, we want to volunteer with different things in the community. They did that. They volunteered at the Tehachapi Hometown Christmas for us. They're volunteering at Marley's Mutts. They're doing other projects, the robotics. It's amazing what they're doing, and now we'll get a chance to highlight them.
Tehachapi is blessed with a large amount of nonprofits that actually fill a void. Government, you don't want government doing everything. You don't want your taxes to go up to pay for everything. And quite frankly, we're not good at a lot of things, but we're really good at making connections and creating relationships. And those people dedicate a lot of time and a lot of money to this community. We thank them for that.
I don't know if you guys want to go and talk about any of the other highlights of episodes, but I think we covered a lot here.
I think we have. Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but this has been pretty fun.
It's fun to go back down memory lane.
Yeah.
235 episodes over the last 3 years, 3 calendar years, from March 2nd, 2020 to March 2nd, 2023, when we're recording this. We've been able to communicate quite a bit via this platform.
And all of those episodes are available, right? You can download them still from the very beginning.
Yep, the entire history. It stays right there. So it's evergreen, the information, if you want. And then that's why we go back and update topics. Mm-hmm. We'll go back and we'll talk about something that we did 2 years ago. And it's like, hey, it's time to update it. So as we announce a project, a capital project that's going on, this grant came in, we keep you updated with it. So we might hit it 3 or 4 times, but that way people can kind of follow the journey about what's going on here in Tehachapi. Tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite our listeners to share their thoughts and ideas. You can send that email to us at media@TehachapiCityHall.com. And I want to, I'm just going to say thank you for listening. Thank you for taking in this information, sharing it the way you do, because the downloads reflect that. So we just appreciate all the time that the community spends listening to us share with them.
And thank you to Key for leading this effort.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Ashley, Corey, Greg, thank you for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Key.
And Greg, thanks for not pulling the plug on this after like week 2.
And happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
All right. We'll catch you again soon right here on TehachaPod.
TehachaPod is a conversation about Tehachapi, featuring the community members who make this such a special place to call home. If you have a question or a thought you'd like to share, email media@TehachapiCityHall.com. Thank you to Gary Mazzola for sharing his song, This is Tehachapi.